Welcome back. We're going to go ahead and talk about part 2 of chapter 10, which is the code process. I want to kind of let you know that the process for code approval may vary slightly depending on the type of project and the code jurisdiction. I guess what the ultimate goal is to meet all the code requirements so that a building permit can be obtained and construction can begin. Most interior projects, unless they consist of minor repairs or minimal finishes or furniture selections, cannot be constructed without a permit. You need to kind of understand that. Okay, there are different steps of this particular process, and you can see the steps on page 492, or you can look here at the screen. One of the things I always say when you're going to start a project, and the design process that's going through, you've got to do code research. Research should begin by determining the jurisdiction of the project. Remember, the jurisdiction may be a township, city, county, or state. In some cases, there's going to be state and local codes that you have to follow, which you learned in part 1. And after determining which codes and standards apply to a project, the particular requirements should begin researching, like you've got to determine what the occupancy classification is. You're going to learn from chapters 2, 3, 4, and on through this textbook, all of those things you're going to have to research to be able to finalize plans that go in. So an example might be if I'm renovating an existing college facility, I want to concentrate on the code requirements for business occupancies. Yeah, it is a business occupancy. But if the project includes renovation of the cafeteria, that requirements are for assembly, and they may have to be reviewed as well. And there may be a couple of occupancies that may be within one project. A majority of the research should be done in the programming stage of the design process. At the same time, the client and building information is being collected. Most jurisdictions have some form of preliminary plan review procedure that it could occur in early stages of a project. Although a preliminary review may not be required on all projects, for some projects it may be crucial so that critical items can be finalized before taking the next step. The purpose of preliminary review meetings is to go over the major code issues and determine if the conclusions drawn from the research are valid. For example, discuss any code conflicts that you found during your research. Also ask the code officials if they have any concerns about the design if they foresee any potential problems. So a lot of times I go through, do preliminary drawings, then I review it with the code official. I take notes so that the necessary changes can be made to the design if they see something that jumps out at them. And it's also important to prepare a summary of the meeting for the project records. After the meeting, send a copy of the summary to each attending the code official and ask him or her either to sign off of the summary indicating acceptance or send written confirmation. If a design requires the use of performance codes instead of certain prescriptive requirements, remember we learned the difference between performance and prescriptive, then a preliminary review with the code official is necessary rather than optional. In fact, a concept report has to be submitted before beginning the design. So you've gone through this process and then you kind of don't really agree because often a code provision can have more than one interpretation. Usually these discrepancies can be settled with the help of a code official, but some code officials undergo training and attend code review classes and therefore can usually provide additional insight for a particular code. They also have access to experts of other officials. However, the designer might not always agree with the code official's interpretation, and they may see something different. So if a mutual acceptance solution cannot be reached or allow performance criterion cannot be found, the appeals process may be necessary. And the appeals process is a formal request made in writing either through a code official or directly to a board of appeals. And generally, each of the codes provides particular reasons why an appeal can be made. The codes also regulate who can make the appeal. Usually this is an owner or a representative of the owner. A designer can typically represent the owner and make the appeal to the board. Now, the Board of Appeal consists of a variety of professionals. You'll find this in each jurisdiction or city. So there are a variety of professionals who meet to review conflicts about how a code is interpreted or applied to a particular situation. The board does not have the authority to waive a code requirement. Rather, it is the board's responsibility to review the appeal, listen to both sides, and decide whether the appeal follows the intent of the code. So once all of this is done and everything's outlined, then you will have construction documents. You will complete your construction documents if you're a designer, and you will end up turning those complete set of working drawings or construction documents to the city, so your city building inspector, and it will go through the process and trying to get a permit. A permit is typically required for any design project that requires construction. It's not limited to new construction or additions to an existing building or alterations made to a building, or something even if you have a change in occupancy. Installation of regulated equipment, or sometimes certain types of repairs or building maintenance. The permit is issued only after a plan review has been completed. The code official must review and approve the submitted construction documents, which consist of drawings, specifications, and any other documentation that may be required. Typically, the licensed contractor submits the documents and obtains the permit for the project. However, in some jurisdictions, especially in larger cities, require an independent consultant known as a code expediter to obtain the permit. In some cases, the building owner or a registered design professional can also get the permit. To obtain the permit, the contractor must submit a permit application and a permit fee along with construction documents. So if you look in your textbook on page 499, you'll see an example of an application of a building permit. Many jurisdictions use online permit applications that can be filled out electronically. Usually multiple copies of construction documents must be submitted. It is at this stage that the code officials fully review the drawings and specification. The whole process can take from 1 day to several weeks depending on the size of the project and the number of code officials who must review the plans or check the project, and the workload of the code department. The set of documents is typically checked by both plans examiner, which that could be somebody that's particular for only does electrical, mechanical, plumbing, and then of course usually it's also by the fire marshal. Building then of course begins, and you end up seeing of course construction and inspection. So the code process does not stop with the issuance of a permit. During the construction of a project, a code official must make several inspections on the job site. This is done to guarantee that the work matches what is in the construction documents, and that the work continues to comply with the codes. Inspections must be made at a certain intervals during the construction, usually before the work is concealed or covered up, like before they pour the slab, framing inspections, system inspections, gypsum board and lath inspections, fire and smoke resistant penetration inspections, and you could go on. You can see a list of them in your textbook. After each intermittent inspection, construction can only continue if the inspector grants an approval. If the inspector finds that the project is not acceptable, or corrections notice is issued and another inspection is scheduled, allowing the contractor time to correct the problem. So if the inspector feels that a condition is unsafe or that the construction is not being carried out in an acceptable manner, a stop work order will be issued. This means that no other work on the site can occur until that particular problem is addressed. An inspection may not always be done by a code official. Remember, some jurisdictions allow or even require the owner to have the construction process inspected by a separate inspection agency. So we've gone through the whole process, and the last one is your final inspection. This inspection process is the way the code official verifies that the project is being built according to the most current drawings and that the construction meets the applicable codes. Once the project is complete, the inspector will do a final walkthrough to confirm final compliance with the codes and to make sure that the space is ready to be occupied. When the final inspections are completed, the construction of the project is typically considered finished. However, before anyone can move in, there are different types of certificates that you've got to have. A certificate of completion is used when the structure or systems within a space or building are complete. The certificate is usually necessary to connect to a local utilities, especially in new construction. A certificate of occupancy must be issued to allow the tenant to occupy the space or building. It is issued after the final inspection has been completed, and sometimes it's called C of O, and the person obtaining the building permit typically requests the C of O from the code official. This is usually the contractor. It's during the final inspection, including the fire marshal, is satisfied that the building or space complies with the code and that construction is complete and a certificate is issued. In some jurisdictions, the certificate of occupancy is referred to as the use in occupancy. Now, sometimes if you read in the textbook, you've heard about it, there may be a temporary certificate of occupancy. This is an example like I have everything in but the granite countertops. And so they'll do a temporary certificate of occupancy. This will allow the project or portion of the project to be occupied as long as the code official feels that the occupants will not be any danger because the entire project is incomplete. So that kind of tells you a little bit overview. So keep reading.